What is the next Pokemon Legends game gonna be based around or set within? Well, one of the big things we do know is that there were actually, and I really mean actually, leaked details about two projects that were cancelled. Now, one of these projects was Legends 3, and the other one is Project Ringo. And we're going to talk about both of these because these are related to where the next Pokemon Legends game was and could still be actually based. Now, I will have to find you guys a bunch of information about this, but we're going to start with, of course, the project names, which is right over here on PokeOS, the best Pokemon website in existence. If you guys want to get your hands on Pokemon information, go there. But here is basically where we start off. So this is actual leaked code names. Now, code names are basically just what these names they use temporarily, like behind closed doors over at Game Freak, the company that makes all the Pokemon mainline games. The code names they use are basically just project names before they give them the final, like, you know, names of like Winds and Waves or Ruby Sapphire. It doesn't matter. But these are some of the code names we've had for previous projects. So, for example, Project 2030 is just, you know, the Generation 11 game. So whatever comes after Winds and Waves. Then we have Project Seed, which is a open world game set in Japan that connects Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh. Now, this Project Seed, we're going to make a whole entire video about this. But what we want to talk about today is Project Ringo, or L3, so Legends 3, or also Project L2, which is the scrapped Legends Ho-Oh and Lugia. Yes, originally they were going to be making a Ho-Oh Lugia, you know, Johto Legends game, but I think we ended up with a ZA instead, which, no offense, it makes me a little sad because I'm a Johto boy, okay? I love Johto. Johto is my favorite region, so alongside Hoenn, so a little bit sad about that, but what we want to look at here is specifically, of course, Project Ringo, which is Legends Galar, and this is supposed to still be in development. Of course, they could have canceled that too, and maybe they're not going to be doing another Legends game at all. Maybe they just completely cancel that project and focus on something else or repurpose that into something else. That's always a possibility, but we know that this project was far enough into development that it should still happen, right? It should still happen. Of course, you have a bunch of the other, you know, code names. Of course, a Pokemon Project Mega Oasis, which is Pokopia, which makes sense, and Mega Oasis, I mean, come on. Sankaku, which is a Legend ZA DLC. Ikaku, which was ZA. Sudachi, which is Scarlet and Violet's DLC. Titan, which was Scarlet and Violet. Hayabusa, which was Arceus. What is this? Delphi? Yeah, Delphi for Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. Mega Turtle for Home. Turtle for Bank. And of course, Salmon for Poke Transporter. But yes, so the big one we look at, again, is Ringo. Now, if we go over here, we can find an entire thing about this. So, again, this is spoiler stuff, so beware. But here's what they said. So, Project Ringo is an experimental title developed by Game Freak's prototype development division, currently being prototyped as a candidate for the next Pokemon Legends game, or L3. Internally, it is described as a project focused on Pokemon AI and physics-based simulation. When they say AI here, they're not talking about literally AI generated, like AI gen. They're talking about like Pokemon AI, as in, because you got to remember, every Pokemon game, or really any video game in existence, has used AI in some shape or form. Like, you're always fighting against a computer in these games. Like, that is technically AI, if you want to call it that. I feel like we're just, like, the word AI is just kind of a buzzword at this point, used just like a blanket statement for shit, and they just use that and shove it into everything. But the problem is that there is an actual use case for it, which is every video game ever using it, okay? Like, if you've ever played Counter-Strike, the chickens that walk around the map, those use AI, aka they have some sort of, like, you know, set code that allows them to go in different directions and do different things. Like, AI is used in games, okay? And specifically, they seem to want to focus on physics-based simulation, aka the Pokemon doing things that are actually dynamic in battle. You can even see the character here running around fighting a gigantic looking colossal or whatever. Now, the game is set in Galar roughly 1,000 years in the past, in an era where Poké Balls do not yet exist, and the concept of a Pokemon trainer has not yet been formalized. Humans and Pokemon coexist directly, and players rely on Pokemon they encounter locally, forming groups and flocks rather than structural teams. A major gameplay pillar involves group-based interaction, where Pokemon move, react, and fight together using advanced AI behaviors. Now, these mechanics are designed to support battles against giant Dynamax Pokemon, which makes sense because it will be Galar, so Sword and Shield, so Dynamaxing will be back. which are treated as overwhelming natural forces rather than standard boss encounters. The experience emphasizes scale, positioning, cooperation, and emergent behavior driven by physics systems. And then you got the thingy right here. You got some actual footage. Now, I'm not going to play this purely because I don't want to get in trouble. But basically, what they do say here, though, is that internally the project is summarized with the concept AI X physics, highlighting a strong focus on Pokemon behavior and autonomous decision making. So basically, the idea of your Pokemon, like the Pokemon themselves would make, like, actually do things in battles. Like, okay, the Pokemon would learn how you attack and how you move and how you do certain things to adapt and change against you, right? That's the idea, at least. So it would be autonomous decision making. It would be making decisions on its own, not have like a preset notion of what it's going to do. Like, maybe like normally in battles, you'd have like a preset, like, okay, so you have a team and that team has a preset amount of like things it can do and certain things it will not do, right? That's still going to be the case here, but there will be more leeway for it to actually decide on its own decisions. By the way, group and swarm dynamics, physics-driven movement and interactions, and large-scale encounters in open environments. Now, exploration takes place across vast, untouched landscapes of ancient Galar. Shaped entirely by nature, survival and progression depend on how players use Pokemon abilities to navigate the terrain, interact with the environment, and protect early human settlements. We can see some of that images of what they're thinking about there. We even see here what looks to be like some sort of early version, and I think even could be wrong, but you even see here from Centro sharing some of that stuff, like actual images, like early images they have, which the game looks really nice here. Some of these early like production screenshots or whatever, like they actually look pretty solid. I think there was another shot here, right? So also in Legends Galar, apparently a new form of Slowbro could be introduced. Let's not say it will be, but it does look kind of a little bit like a chef. I'm not gonna lie, it does look a little bit like Chef Dente. But yeah, so. Let's move on. Next, from a narrative perspective, one of the core objectives is the creation of the first Gigamax Pokeball. I guess Gigantamax ball, like the big, you know, guys know the big fat ones you throw at the Dynamax Pokemon or the Gigantamax Pokemon. That's essentially, I guess, what they're talking about here. Like, it will be the creation of that in the story. Leaked materials show early concepts of sealing stones, primitive containment tools, and handcrafted devices. Ooh, dude, this would be interesting. I would be interested in see how they would pull this off without the Pokeballs. Because remember, Pokeballs, if this was 1,000 years in the past, Pokeballs wouldn't exist. So you'd have to use some other method, and Pokeballs we know were, like, I guess, introduced in Hisui, right? We saw that with that game. So the curious thing would be then, what would this be like? How would they do this? How would this make sense? I wonder, you know? I'm very curious. It is intriguing how they would do this. They could do something like, I mean, it sounds bad, but like, I'm not even gonna, you know, I ain't gonna say, I was gonna say like leashes, like a dog leash or some shit, but that just feels a little bit wrong. So I don't know, sealing stones sounds interesting, but that also feels like, hey, that sounds a little similar to another game. Another game that yes, you know. But primitive containment tools and handcrafted devices. I'm very curious to see if they do this, if this game does happen, how that would look. Suggesting an experimental phase in the origin of Pokemon capture technology. Now, the storyline bridges the gap between simple coexistence and the eventual rise of modern trainer systems. At the time of the leak, Project Ringo was still in a prototyping phase, continuing as an L3 candidate rather than a fully greenlit project. So Pokemon Legends Galar is believed to be targeting a release window of 2027 or later, following Pokemon Winds and Waves Generation 10 and its DLC. As with all information in this section, the details are unofficial internal documents and represent early development concepts that may change in or be discarded entirely. So yeah, to put it into blunt terms, there's a lot of potential here, even as Central says. Now the Pokemon Winds and Waves actually have some good graphics. Makes me really excited for future games like Legends 3 Galar, as it should look even better, which again, very, very true. Also, again, this idea, like, that the game would be like a Pikmin style game. We already spoke about this. Like, you see some of the images here, right, that showed like this idea of you kind of swarming Pokemon around you, which is really crazy, but it would be interesting. So the next Legends game, which is currently titled Pokemon Legends Galar, could seemingly finally have a Pikmin-like aspect where you command up to 30 Pokemon in your squad. Now, I didn't see that in that post, but that is something that I have heard. Now, the game was leaked as part of the Game Freak breach, but the Pikmin-style aspect was not initially revealed. Pokemon Legends Galar will be set in a prehistoric Galar and is currently scheduled for a 2028 release or later. Here are the details. Set in ancient Galar. We already know that 1,000 years before the Pokeball didn't exist. Form wild alliances with Pokemon to battle massive Dynamax foes. Theme AI X physics, of course. An objective, craft the first Gigantamax Pokeball using ancient technology. So yeah, it's crazy to think that we're going to Galar now, right? That we'd be going to Galar already, considering how recently we already went there. You know what I mean? Like, we went there so recently, it is kind of crazy to think about it. So yeah, I don't know. It is an interesting prospect. I wanted to talk about this for a while now because I've been curious about what you guys might think about a Legends, just a Legends game being set somewhere that isn't like a region. I mean, it is a past region now, Galar, but it feels so recent. Even though if you think about it, it came out in 2019, so it's been over 7 years since Sword and Shield came out. But I feel like there's so many better places they could base it on. I feel like we already had Sinnoh, right? We've had Kalos and Sinnoh, but like we haven't even touched the idea. I mean, technically, Pokopia did the post-apocalyptic thing, so maybe you don't need to go to Kanto. But I feel like Johto is still a perfect candidate. I think Hoenn is a perfect candidate. I think Unova is really interesting because we had the whole thing with the dragons, like the old dragon and all that stuff. The ancient dragons and shit. So you could do something about that. There's so much potential there with like knights and armor and shit. Like, all I'm saying is there is so much potential in some of the older stuff, but I feel like it's weird that we'd be going to Sword and Shield of all things. Which, to be fair, Sword and Shield, Galar does have some potential, but I just don't care about Dynamax. I just don't care about Dynamaxing, so I'm just a little less like, I have a little bit less of a connection to it, but I do feel like if you're a newer fan, maybe you started with Sword and Shield, so maybe to you that would be nostalgic, because like to you that was like 7 years ago, so it's like, oh my god, it's like the same feeling I had when Oras came out, and I was like, and that was like what? Like after I played it, that was a long time, like that was a while after I played it, but still, so like, when did I play it? Maybe 2004, 2005, and then we had it in 2014, so that's like 9 years. So it's not really that bad. If Galar comes out, if a Legends Galar game comes out in, say, 2028, that would have been 9 years since the original game. Like 9 years since the original like Sword and Shield came out. So it's not that crazy if it comes out by then. It actually isn't that far-fetched, to be honest with you. Also, just a random little piece of information I'm going to include, but here is from Central saying upcoming Pokemon anime arc leaks. They'll be doing a crossover with the mobile Pokemon game and Pokopia. Koraidon and Miraidon will appear in the anime, apparently. A new Pokemon from Gen 10 will also be teased, apparently. And looks like Pokemon Horizons will continue for at least another full year, which is, I mean, fair enough, because, yeah, it has to. It has to, because we don't have the new game out yet to change up, like, the main plot and, start a new anime, so to say. But yeah, so yeah, that's my stuff about Pokemon, Legends Galar and some, Pokemon anime related stuff at the end here. And hopefully you guys can tell me in the comment section down below. I'm very curious to know, do you think a Legends Galar game, first of all, is it necessary? Do you want a Legends Galar game, or would you prefer if it was a different, region, different location, just different everything? Like, would you prefer something else over what we are essentially being offered here? Let me know. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.